The McCloskey's saga continues, this time with some good news. Republicans are demanding a DOJ investigation of the rogue prosecutor who charged the couple who pointed guns at protesters. If you're not familiar with the story, it's quite simple. At the peak of the Black Lives Matter riots, a large group entered private property. The McCloskey's came out with guns to defend their property. That's really the gist of the news. Now, the protesters or rioters or whatever you want to call this group, because they did enter private property, they did break the gate, argued that they were peacefully protesting and this was illegal and all that other nonsense. The McCloskey's argued they were being threatened. And according to police, in fact, it would seem there was one armed individual, another person wearing a bullet-resistant vest. But there's a lot to go through here because in the past week, we've learned some pretty crazy new information. This rogue prosecutor, it would seem, is trying to frame the McCloskey's. Now, a couple weeks ago, we learned. You see in this photo of Patricia McCloskey with the handgun. They turned that in. And when the crime lab got it, it didn't work. So the prosecutor says reassemble it and make it work. And then they said upon reassembly, it turns out it can fire. You know, it was clean and readily available to fire or to produce lethal force or whatever it is they're trying to claim about the weapon. However, the McCloskey's say the firing pin was put in backwards because it was being used as a prop and it was not actually able to be used. There's more good news because as it seems, the prosecutor is trying to frame this couple. The police are refusing to sign off on bogus claims. Check this out. St. Louis prosecutor to detective on McCloskey case, quote, "I suggest you quickly reassess this evidence." Oh, we get it, baby. Morality government is here. That's what I warned you about. And it's getting worse. This is one of the most important legal battles we will see. According to the attorney general in Missouri, the McCloskey's had every right to defend their property. Missouri is a very strong castle doctrine state, meaning the McCloskey's had no right to retreat no duty to retreat. In some states, you actually have to flee your property, and only when you can't flee are you allowed to defend yourself. Well, Missouri ain't like that. In fact, according to the AG, he says you can actually use lethal force to prevent someone from entering your property. So technically, they could have used lethal force on these people for simply entering the gated community. One argument being that coming into that street was akin to being in their living room. Now, that may be a bit extreme. And the McCloskey's didn't shoot anybody, but they were standing on their property saying, "Get back and get away." Yet they're still being charged. And it seems that the DA is trying everything in her power to frame this family. And it's nightmarish. I'll tell you why it's nightmarish. And then we'll talk about the latest update with the DOJ. In Austin, an armed Black Lives Matter guy approached a vehicle with a rifle and his hand on the grip. Some people said it was low ready. Some people said he didn't actually have it ready. Some people said he did eventually aim the weapon. Well, he got shot and he got killed. And the far left mourns this man as a martyr. A guy marching around the street with a rifle. He's on their side. He's good. These people on their own property who did not seek anything out. People come on their property apparently armed, and now they're the bad guys. Now the prosecutor, the force of government, is literally coming after these people with bogus charges. First, I'll say this. Shame on the police who actually came and enforced these bogus charges. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual officers. You made the choice. I don't care what anyone told you to do. If your friends told you to jump off a cliff, would you do it? No. If your boss tells you to do something that's illegal, don't do it. Why should cops be any different from anybody else? You work at McDonald's. If your boss said, "Hey, spit in that guy's drink," would you do it? No, you wouldn't. I mean, some people might out of fear of losing their job, I guess. But I believe these officers should say, "Look, I'm not doing that. It's illegal." But I'll tell you the good news here. The detective was like, "I'm not signing that." Lead detective initially refused to sign documents prosecutors wrote about the case, but I guess eventually did sign some documents. So I'll tell you what, man. That's why I'm saying there's some good news layered on some bad news. It seems like the police are at least trying to resist, but we can see the DA is manipulating evidence. I'm telling you, reassembling the gun to make it seem like it was capable of firing. They have no evidence to prove that. They received the gun, it couldn't fire, so they altered the evidence. That to me is insane. Well, that's the gist of the story. What I want to talk about is the potential for a DOJ investigation because this is the newest update. Republican congressmen demand investigation of rogue prosecutor who charged couple who pointed guns at protesters. I'm glad to see Republicans finally doing something, but I'll tell you what, asking for an investigation or demanding it, in my opinion, is not enough. We need a legit investigation, and this is what the feds are for, in my opinion. You got to shut this down. These people are on their own property, defending it from extremists. They should not be going to prison or even having their weapons confiscated or being jammed up in any way over this. But let me remind you why I bring up the dude in Austin. This is an attack on normal people. If the government gets away, if the state government of Missouri gets away with criminalizing people who, are on their own property, who are not seeking out any conflict, if they criminalize this, I'm telling you, man, they're already coming to homes in Portland. They've gone to residential neighborhoods now 3 or 4 nights. Actually, no, like a week. Over the past week, every night they're going to residential neighborhoods. They're vandalizing homes. They're confronting homeowners. We cannot allow governments to target people who are minding their own business. That's when it gets really bad. The morality policing and the morality government. Let's read the story. National Review says, Republican members of Congress on Thursday demanded that the Justice Department investigate rogue prosecutors, including the prosecutor leading the case against the St. Louis couple who pointed guns at protesters outside their house last month. Criminals should live in fear of prosecution, not innocent Americans defending themselves, their families, and their property, read a letter to Attorney General William Barr from 17 Republican congressmen, led by Representative Jody Arrington of Texas. The prosecuting attorney's actions appear to be driven more by an anti-gun, not anti-crime agenda. In a June 28th incident that was caught on video, Mark and Patricia McCloskey pointed guns at protesters outside after the crowd entered a private gated community on their way to St. Louis Mayor Lyda Crusen's residence to demand her resignation. The couple, both personal injury lawyers, stood outside their home in Portland Place. Isn't that funny how this all works out? They live at Portland Place. Of all of the locations that could have been named something, we get the weird Portland assault in actual Portland, Oregon, and now Portland Place in Missouri. Are the activists do they just like the word Portland? Whatever. You know the gist. There were no trespassing signs. There were private property signs. They came anyway. The couple was charged with unlawful use of a weapon by St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. We urge you and the Department of Justice to investigate Ms. Gardner's actions and the actions of every rogue prosecutor who fails to uphold the rule of law and secure the rights of our citizens, the lawmakers urged in their letter to the Attorney General. Hear, hear, bravo. I just read you the letter in the previous segment from the PPA in Portland, the Portland Police Association, saying that we arrest the criminals, but we have no reason to believe that these criminals will actually face some kind of penalty. The district attorney will release them and they will face no penalty for the crimes they have committed. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. Hopefully the DOJ goes above and beyond and starts looking at New York and Fort Worth, these places that were releasing these extremists. Now, in New York, it was low-level protest offense, fine, but they're also locking down churches. So I'll tell you what, man, you will get no goodwill from me on this issue. If you're going to lock down churches and lock down sporting events, then then you can't just be releasing people violating your own lockdown orders because they're supporting your cause. The DOJ needs to get involved. Hopefully this letter results in that. The purpose of the letter is to stop rogue prosecutors who are trampling the constitutional rights of citizens and ensure other local prosecutors do not copycat Gardner and cause a more pervasive problem with this because of politically motivated local elected leaders who want to advance either their personal or political agenda, Arrington said in an interview with National Review. Bravo. I agree, man. And I'll say it again. At a certain point, it comes down to the individual police officers and the individual prosecutors, anybody working with these people who make the choice. Will you violate the law to support the ambitions of a politician? Because I'll tell you what, man, when it comes time for a reckoning and we start purging the corrupt cronies in government, you will be fired, or the police departments, and you will lose everything. I absolutely believe anybody who chooses to violate the Constitution, to violate the rights, should face some kind of, penalty, some kind of reckoning. And for the police, that includes you too. If you're a cop and you sign off on false documents, you arrest people, you charge people, and you know the charges are bunk, well, I think then you got to be held responsible because that was your choice. There was a case back during Occupy Wall Street where I was filming. And I happened to film a photographer standing on the sidewalk. He got arrested and they filed false charges. The officer lied under oath to the court. And guess what? Nothing was done to that cop. That's a bad cop. That's called corruption. That's called an officer not caring about the Constitution, civil rights, and standing up for the people. And nothing happened. And I'll be salty about that forever, basically, because I don't like the idea of people breaking the law and there being no justice. Now, it goes the other way. Or I should say, not that it goes the other way, but that it doesn't matter to what extent, in what capacity, you as an enforcer of the law are breaking the law, be it somebody who's supposed to be prosecuting. Kim Gardner, she should be fired, impeached, whatever, and potentially criminally charged for corruption, for trying to fraudulent or to alter evidence. Let's read more. Quote, let's nip it in the bud and now have a pervasive chain reaction which could create more fear on the part of law-abiding citizens. The Texas Republican continued, which would create. It would also embolden the bad guys, the criminals, and the thugs that have hijacked peaceful protests who have a singular focus, and that's to sow chaos in our communities and fear in the hearts of our fellow Americans. Arrington added that one way to hold prosecutors accountable would be to defund them, and another might be professional sanctions within the St. Louis Bar Association. I don't want to get ahead of the investigation, but on its face, it looks like an egregious abuse of power by someone who clearly has a history of anti-gun policies in politics. Arrington added that while he is very sensitive to the federal government's intervening in state and local matters, the constitutional rights of citizens being trampled by those who are supposed to enforce the law and secure those rights at a state and local level is a matter of federal jurisdiction. We've seen what happens in these cities where local leaders tolerate this. Whatever you tolerate, you will get more of. We need to make sure than federal jurisdiction that we send a message to law-abiding citizens that your government has your back in terms of securing those fundamental rights. I am not just going to be criticizing the DA. I absolutely will be criticizing the police here. Let me read you the story and show you what's going on. This is from a week ago. The lead St. Louis police detective investigating McCloskey's case refused to sign at least two versions of court documents prosecutors drafted, according to a review of those documents obtained by Five on Your Side. Now, for that, bravo. The individuals need to be held accountable. If they come to you and say, sign this evidence, and you know it's not real, don't do it. It's your choice. In addition, the police contended at least one person in the crowd was armed, and another was wearing a bullet-resistant vest after analyzing videos taken from June 28th when the couple confronted the protesters. The case has attracted national attention since photos and videos went public. This we all know. Critics, nearly all Republicans, have said Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner should not charge Mark and Patricia McCloskey because the state's castle doctrine and stand your ground laws allowed them to defend their property against perceived threats. The documents obtained by Five on Your Side include an email Gardner's Assistant Circuit Attorney Chris Hinckley sent to the lead investigator on the case, Sergeant Curtis Bergdorf. Hinckley emailed police the day before the McCloskeys were served with a search warrant, stating it needed to happen now. At this point, everything points to these weapons being real and loaded, but no one has asked or confirmed, he wrote. Come trial, they'll say they were waving around a BB gun and an air rifle. Hinckley also wrote to Bergdorf's commander, Major Angela Kuntz. Our office is receiving inquiries from the public and press about a warrant application and potential charges. We've thus far said the matter remains under investigation. I'd really like to avoid pointing to a police follow-up request as the holdup, but I won't control the messaging if this goes on any longer. Please see what you can do to help this along. Again, I'm asking for priority on the firearms issue. The search warrant allowed officers to seize the guns the McCloskeys used during the encounter. The rifle Mark McCloskey used was intact when it arrived at the crime lab. The pistol that Patricia used was not, according to documents obtained by Five on Your Side. Hinckley ordered the crime lab to disassemble and reassemble Patricia McCloskey's gun and signed a court document stating it was, quote, capable of lethal use at the time she pointed it at protesters. Yes, using a twisted understanding of the concept, it technically was, you'd have to disassemble and reassemble it as far as we can tell, but it was capable. Yeah, sure. Because what, you could throw it at their face? The McCloskey's attorney, Joel Schwartz, said Patricia McCloskey's gun was not functional because it was once used as a prop at a trial. The McCloskey's are both attorneys. He said Gardner's interpretation of the law is wrong. It's a loose interpretation of the statute, and the law requires a weapon to be operable at the time of the offense. A spokeswoman for Gardner, a Democrat, said she could not comment on the pending case. Hinckley also wrote the document the lead detective did sign, known as the probable cause statement. Hinckley also wrote the document the lead detective did sign, known as the probable cause statement. What are they trying to say? But it went through at least 2 revisions after Bergdorf outlined 14 concerns he had about the document. 5 on your sign has learned. Wow. So among those concerns, Hinckley characterized the protest as peaceful. Oh, I love it. Peaceful and organized. Hinckley wrote that McCloskey's was armed with a semi-automatic handgun. Bergdorf wrote the phrase should read, what appears to be. Hinckley called Mark McCloskey's gun an assault rifle. Bergdorf called the word assault a propaganda term. Wow, this is amazing. And assault doesn't mean what they think it means. Hinckley wrote the protesters passed through an open gate. No, not true. Technically true. Someone opened it. Hinckley wrote that Mark McCloskey's gun was visibly loaded with an ammunition clip. Bergdorf wrote that he would have to verify that detail because it wasn't mentioned in his report. Hinckley wrote both victims, identified by their initials, feared that the defendant might fire her weapon. Bergdorf wrote the term angrily was subjective and he didn't like it. Hinckley wrote it's a fact and an element of the offense. The police are bravo to the cops for resisting and pushing back on the courts here, because a lot of times the cops just like, sure, whatever you say. 5 on your side also obtained a voicemail. Hinckley left Bergdorf after he wrote his response to Bergdorf's objections. He states, Curtis, you need to call me back. I wrote a long email to you trying to ask a bunch of questions about whatever it is you said some was expletive. Now we need to straighten this out because I'm about done with this crap. Call me back. Since the couple was charged, Bergdorf's investigation has continued according to the documents. He noted in follow-up reports that at least one of the protesters was armed with a handgun, and another was wearing a bullet-resistant vest with the words human shield on it. Some of the phrases he was able to decipher from the footage collected by prosecutors included, you own a business, your business is gone. We coming back, baby. You ain't the only expletive with a gun. They coming back to your house. These are threats. In another live stream video, Bergdorf wrote a man was heard saying, I was in front, so I was the one who opened the gate. The gate was broken after they pulled a gun. So what law did we break? We keep guns there, but not for show, though. Not to look a certain way, but for use. If they would have shot, then they would have been put down. Wow. Bergdorf wrote a man was saying this. This is the police recognizing there was a real threat here. The only thing Bergdorf wrote from what he could hear from McCloskey's included Patricia McCloskey shouting, go, as she pointed her gun at demonstrators. They mentioned then previous coverage. We also have another. So this is the gist of the story. I just want to point out here as we come to the last little tidbit. The prosecutors are trying to frame these people. And what I mean by frame is that, very simply, they are falsely framing the incident to make it seem like they did something wrong. The protesters were violent. They were screaming threats. You could hear the threats. We coming back. We have guns. We'll put them down. You could hear that. The cops acknowledged that. The cops still came and seized the weapon. But bravo to the officers for doing what they can to uphold the law in this regard. If this goes unchecked, what we've seen in Portland, what we've seen in Missouri, will expand across this country. The McCloskey's are certainly fighting back. They're trying to get Gardner disqualified from her case. Well, let me read. Attorney for Mark and Patricia McCloskey files motion to disqualify Gardner, her office, from pursuing the case. So we will see how this plays out. But man, this DOJ investigation, we need it. Bill Barr, we're counting on you to do the right thing and make sure that these politically ambitious prosecutors, mayors, will not be allowed to lie, cheat, and steal their way through this. They're lying. I want to point out one thing too. You see in this photo, this man's holding a boom mic. A lot of people take this photo and they believe this man's holding a weapon. He's not. He's holding a microphone for a camera. You can see Patricia pointing the weapon at him. Let me just make one thing very clear. The left is arguing she's threatening a man with a camera. The right, many people on the right and many people on the left, many on the right are saying that this guy's holding a weapon. All that matters is whether or not Patricia McCloskey knew or whether or not she thought she was being threatened. This guy's pointing something which looks like it's got a barrel. She might have seen that and thought it was a weapon, not knowing what it was. you can't expect everybody to know what a boom mic is. Did she feel threatened? I'd argue this photo proves that the McCloskey's did, in fact, feel threatened, and that's why they were brandishing weapons. It does. I'm sorry. That's why they tell you to be careful when you're waving things around, even a cell phone, around cops. Now, I don't like the idea of cops killing people over phones or cameras, but we've got a complicated circumstance, and it seems the law is on the side of the McCloskey's. In New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio was breaking the law and stealing taxpayer funds for his re-election campaign. Ted Wheeler stood with the rioters in Portland for his re-election campaign. Then you had Kate Brown, the governor in Portland, defending the protesters, the AG defending the rioters, defending the rioters because they want to get re-elected. Kim Gardner's got, I believe that's her name, right? Kim Gardner, whatever. The prosecutor here, Gardner, is politically ambitious and is trying to use this to bolster her career and defend the extremists, but they're all ideologues. Good on the cops for standing up and refusing to sign the documents, even after getting cussed out by the DA. I got to tell you, man, it's kind of crazy to hear this story. Typically, the police and the DA's office work together. I mean, that's my understanding. I don't know if you've ever watched, say, Law and Order or whatever. I'm not saying it's exactly how it goes because it's TV. But the DA and the police coordinate because the police investigate, the DA prosecutes. To see this break is really, really interesting. Do the right thing. The DOJ should investigate, should shut down these corrupt politicians 100%. Because I will remind you of one thing. The one thing I've said earlier in this video, the one important point. When it was the far leftist with the rifle in Austin, he was a martyr to these people when he was armed. When they tried to defend their property and did not seek out confrontation, they call for their heads. You see how the double standard works. Rules for thee, but not for me. They will be marching around with guns. They will justify everything they do, and they will use every twisted word of the law and every connection they have to punish you, the homeowner, minding your own business on a afternoon, sunny day, or maybe it was cloudy, whatever. They'll come to your house. Do not let them. Stop it here. We need Bill Barr to do the right thing. Come in. We'll see how it plays out. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net, and I will see you there.